All right, in this video, we're going to be going through what a proficiency scale looks like. This is from the Willard Public Schools, and we'll be sharing a template from Willard Public Schools as well that you'll be able to use to work through your own proficiency scales. So we're just going to start from the top and we'll work our way down. At the very top, you're going to put whatever your subject is, then you're going to list your standard, and then you're going to tell what grade level you're working at, okay? Now, I'm going to skip the 4 and I'm going to go straight to the 3. 3 is the learning target. This is the actual goal for all students. So this would be your on grade level standard, okay? So for this one, they have to tell and write time to the nearest minute and measure time intervals in minutes, all right? Now, that learning goal is pretty simple, not difficult to understand, okay? Very specifically, though, the learning target is written out, okay? The kids have to tell time to the nearest minute, including AM and PM, and then there is an example, right? When given a series of analog clock faces and digital clock displays with morning and evening designations, record the time indicated by each clock to the nearest minute and then order them chronologically. Now, that's a lot more than just telling and writing time to the nearest minute and measuring time intervals, right? The ordering them chronologically wasn't anywhere in this learning target. Now, up here, the standard is tell and write time to the nearest minute and measure time in intervals in minutes. So this teacher might be blending two standards, but the kids will be handed this sheet and the kids know exactly what the assessment is going to be because this is the assessment, right? The kids know exactly what's going to happen so they can practice. Now, if a student is able to do this, then they can get a 3.0 and move on. But if everybody else isn't ready to move on, then they might be moving on and trying to do something that is in the 4 category, all right? So in the 4 category, this is where the student is going to demonstrate in-depth inferences and applications that go beyond what was taught. So for this one, I might hand a student a train schedule or a bus schedule, and I might give them some questions about it, or I might ask them to come up with some questions from this schedule and see what they can figure out. You know, like if a train is traveling to Chicago from Philadelphia, right? Which train are you going to pick up? What time are you going to arrive at the station? Things like that. How long is it going to take? So that would be a 4. Now, we usually are, it's easy for us to tell the 4s, right? We know when they get it. We know when they're ready to move on. The 3s are the kids who are on target. It's my 2s and my 1s that can be difficult. So when you're setting this up, one of the ways that people find that they can break this down is by looking at vocabulary. So they might say, well, a student might know what AM and PM stand for. They might be able to identify hours and minutes. They might know the big hand and the little hand. So those things might come under foundational knowledge. And so now I know that, well, the student is at a 2.0. They at least know the parts that they need to be able to move on to a 3.0. So they are at a 2.0. Now, this one, they have all the vocabulary broken down for AM, clock face, etc., 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 right? So if I'm moving from the bottom up, then I can start working on all of these vocabulary terms first together as a class, and then we can start to break out and see who's ready to do 3.0, who needs to meet with me again at a 2.0, and then I might even have kids who are not at a 2.0. So the 2.0 is broken down here so that the student knows exactly what he or she needs to do. but there are going to be some kids who aren't ready for this. So a 1.0 usually will have some kind of assistance worked in. With help, the student can get a partial success, or the student can do it with help. If it's with help, it's still at a 1.0. It doesn't matter if they can do 3 with help, it's still a 1. It's only when they can stand alone and do the whole thing by themselves. Now, if they can do a 2 by themselves, then they have a 2, not a 1, right? But if maybe they can't do a 2 unless they have help, that's a 1. And if they can't do the 3 or the 2 without help, that's a 1. Okay, so it's very important to empower the kids, empower the learner, and the kids have to know that they're on their own. They have to be able to do it. Just like a plumber who has to be able to know, they have to know when is tightening too much, because you actually cause the pipe to leak if you tighten it too much. So a plumber's going to be all on his own when he goes out to fix a pipe, right? So having somebody with him doesn't show mastery. And it's going to be the same with your students when you're working on these. Now, in this proficiency scale, they do have 0.5s. They have a 0, which is even with help, they just don't get it. And then a 0.5 is maybe they started at a 0 and now they've grown a little bit, so you can let them see growth at a 0.5, but they're not a 1.0 even, because they can't really do anything yet, okay? And then a 1.5 to show growth. They were at a 1.0, they grew a little, but they're not at a 2 yet, so you can let them have the 1.5 to show growth. So a lot of schools do not use the 0.5s, but the Willard Public Schools do, and they must have seen that students needed it for motivation or so that they didn't feel defeated. So that's up to you and your district and your school to decide. So this is what a learning proficiency scale looks like. It's so important to have your learning target on here. That is spelled out. Most of the time, they are in I can statements. I can explain the time. That time is commonly stated, blah, blah, blah. I can explain that the hour hand, blah, blah, blah. I can explain, I can record, okay? Up here it might be that I can tell what these terms mean, and then they have to do it, right? All right, so there will be a link in Google Classroom with a blank proficiency scale so that you have one that you'll be able to use over and over again. And for your assignment, you'll be able to fill one in just for practice.